Episode 311, Focus Competition. At 2 a.m., a large amount of heroin was found in the warehouse of the White's Musical Instrument Austin branch. The president of the branch company had been investigated by the police. According to the investigation, there was a leader with the president of the branch who had escaped town overnight. The picture on the TV was a scene of a large group of reporters surrounding an old man who looked like he was in his 50s or 60s. According to the investigation, White's company already faced a bankruptcy crisis 7 years ago, and the loss was nearly $2 billion. It was the biggest crisis in the history of the company. Later on, it cooperated with an international company and then returned to life. The police had been conducting an investigation already. According to an insider, the fugitive is the only son of the head of the White's Musical Instrument Corporation, who did not comment on the sudden change and has been under police control. The old man was watching with the remote control. He shook his head and sighed. It's terrible. This family should have a good relationship with the wrongs in the capital. How did they suddenly get involved in drugs? Julian, Jeremy, and Seth were having breakfast. Hearing Great-Grandpa say so, Julian took a small bowl and came over asking in her sweet voice, Great-Grandfather, what is drug? Drugs are an awful thing. Don't touch it. It will ruin your life. Captain Henrik said with a heavy heart and shook his head. Julianne must remember that drugs can't be touched. Oh! Julianne held a small bowl and got herself some porridge. But while eating it, she dropped it onto her beautiful clothes. Julianne looked down, pouted, and looked at the old man. It's dirty now. What should I do? The old man laughed lovingly, took a few paper towels, wiped it off, and said, Come, Great-Grandpa will feed you. No, my mother said I have to eat by myself, and I must wipe my own bottom. Otherwise, I will not grow up. Holding a small bowl of porridge, she made a mess. When she saw the porridge falling on her clothes and the floor, Julianne leaned back, and then the small bowl buckled on the floor. Julianne saw it, pouted, and her pair of big eyes suddenly became wet. She cried and looked at Henrik. It dropped. The old man laughed. He took the small bowl and put her on the sofa, picked up the paper towels and wiped the porridge off her clothes. Emma, clean up inside first. Serena had just woken up and finished washing. Coming in, she looked at her watch. It was not even 7:30. As soon as she came out, she saw a small bowl on the ground and her daughter was looking miserable. Serena felt a headache coming on. She was displeased and asked, Julianne, what's this mess? Julianne licked her mouth and tears came out of her big eyes. She sniffed and whispered, I didn't mean it. The small bowl wanted to run. I couldn't catch it, so it fell. You. Serena couldn't help but laugh. She tidied things up and went to the kitchen to get her a bowl. Come, Mom will feed you. Yeah! Julianne saw her mother was not yelling at her and was overjoyed. Carried by her pair of short legs, she moved off the sofa and ran to the dining room. Jeremy and Seth gazed at each other while eating with their own spoons. Serena saw them doing that and couldn't help but ask after a few minutes, What are you doing? Focus competition. Jeremy did not turn his head while using a spoon to eat porridge, chewing while watching Seth. Seth's movements were similar. He nodded and continued to eat. Serena looked at the two little guys, laughing without a word. Finally, they both finished their porridge, but the boys still watched each other. Are you done? Serena curiously came over. Seth shook his head. Unless one of us turns the head first. Jeremy nodded and stared at Seth. Serena reached out and covered the eyes of Jeremy and then turned his head to the side. Jeremy was dumbstruck but immediately yelled, Mom! You sabotaged my game! I lost! Seth laughed, his blue eyes curling beautifully. Then he climbed down the stool and ran to the backyard. Jeremy's dark pupils were full of reluctance. His tender little face became red and he climbed down shouting, Don't run! This doesn't count! Julianne looked at the two brothers running and gazed at Serena. Blinking, she said, Mom, I'm full. Serena knew what she wanted to do at first glance, took a paper towel and wiped her mouth. Go. Julianne immediately climbed down from the stool and ran into the place where the two boys disappeared in small sandals. When Serena had finished eating, it was already 8 o'clock. The tutor hired for the children had just come over. The tutor was a single mother with only a high school diploma. She was more than 30 years old and had a child in middle school. Since her patience and love touched Serena, she was chosen as the tutor of the children. After a few days, the children liked this tutor and she decided to let her stay. After saying hi to her at the door, Serena drove to the company. Busy for a whole morning, she only straightened and stood up when lunch break started. Today, she was supposed to meet Henry in a high-end shopping mall. She was ready to inspect the surrounding area after eating. The appointment was made at a Cantonese restaurant on the first floor of the mall. Out of the restaurant door, it was the south square of the mall, very large and lively. When Serena entered the private room, Henry had not arrived yet. About 10 minutes from their agreed time, Serena sat in the room and refreshed the Facebook page on her phone. Suddenly, the waiter came in and knocked on the door. "Ma'am, there's someone looking for you outside." "Who?" "Let him in." "Well, he hopes you can go to the square. Please come here." Serena was a little surprised and raised her eyebrow. What kind of tricks did Henry have to play? She took her purse and walked outside. Their waiter took her to the south square. The square was empty. She did not see Henry at all. Turning her head, she saw the waiter had already returned to the restaurant. Suddenly, a little boy ran over who was like 7 or 8 years old, holding a flower in his hand. It was a calla lily. "The meaning of calla lily is eternity." Serena took it, smiled a little, and asked, "Who asked you to give it to me?" The little boy replied, "It is Sir."